knew something was wrong the night I matched with him, though I couldn't have told you what exactly it was. Maybe it was the way his profile picture looked just slightly too still, his smile too polite, as if he were trying to pass some secret test. Or maybe it was me, already carrying that ache of loneliness, the kind that blurs your instincts and makes danger look like attention. My name is Claire, and in 2016 I was 23 years old, living in a studio apartment just east of downtown Columbus, Ohio. I worked long hours as a junior financial analyst at a company that specialized in tax compliance, which is just as boring as it sounds. My days blurred into spreadsheets, fluorescent lights, and the same corner deli sandwich at lunch. The only sound I carried home with me at night was the faint hum of traffic and my upstairs neighbor's television bleeding through the ceiling. I told myself I was fine, that solitude was better than chasing something shallow, but the truth was that I spent hours scrolling through dating apps, looking at faces that never looked back. So when his name appeared, Daniel, I didn't expect much. He was 24, dark hair, a little lanky, with glasses that made him look younger than he was. His bio said, quiet type, numbers guy, looking for someone genuine. That word, genuine, snared me. When his message came, it was awkward and earnest, and something about it made me smile. Hey, I know I'm not much, but I thought I'd say hi. You seem different, I typed back before I could overthink. Different how? He hesitated, the dots flickering on and off. Finally, like you actually mean what you write, not just here for attention. It should have been flattering, and in a way it was, but there was a strange pressure buried inside his words, like he was already holding me to a standard I hadn't agreed to. Still, I told myself I was being paranoid. We talked every night for a week. He asked about my favorite books, my family, what I was like in high school. He told me he had always been the invisible one. Quiet, overlooked, sitting in the back of the classroom with his hand down while everyone else raised theirs. Something about the way he said it made me ache. I knew that feeling. When he asked to meet, I agreed. I told myself it was brave. The cafe was small, tucked near the Ohio State campus, dimly lit with amber bulbs and the smell of roasted beans curling through the air. I arrived early, jittery, wiping my hands on my jeans. When he walked in, he was exactly his picture, but sharper somehow. More nervous, shoulders hunched, but eyes locked on me like I was the only thing in the room. Claire? He asked softly. Yeah, I said, and my voice cracked. We sat. We talked for hours. He laughed at my clumsy jokes. He listened too closely, head tilted, nodding at every detail I offered. His knee brushed mine beneath the table just once and lingered too long before pulling away. When the cafe closed, he walked me outside into the cool night air. Can I see you again? He asked, and I heard myself say, of course. That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling, not with excitement, but with a kind of restless hum in my chest. Something about him unsettled me, though I couldn't explain why. Maybe it was the silence that followed his smiles, like he was waiting for me to prove something. Still, I saw him again, and again. The first time he kissed me was in my apartment. His lips were trembling, not from shyness, but from something harder to name, something closer to hunger. He pressed too firmly, breathed too fast, as though he was afraid I might vanish if he didn't hold me hard enough. We ended up in bed, and though I let it happen, there was a coldness in it. Not cruel, but detached, like he was following a script he'd rehearsed 1,000 times without knowing what came after. When it was over, I reached for him, but he was already sitting up, pulling on his shirt. Daniel? I asked. He glanced back with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I'll see you soon. And then he was gone. I should have stopped there. I should have listened to that ache in my stomach. But loneliness can make you rewrite red flags into fairy tales. The next week, he invited me on a road trip. Where to? I asked. You'll see, he said. It's a surprise. When he arrived outside my building, I noticed he hadn't brought anything but a jacket. No bag, no backpack, no toothbrush. You travel light, I joked. He smiled thinly. I don't need much. We drove west out of the city, the skyline fading in the rearview mirror. The sky turned molten orange, then sank into indigo. The road narrowed, winding through stretches of dark trees. He talked, but I noticed he never said where we were going. He just kept asking me questions about my fears, my regrets, whether anyone would miss me if I disappeared for a while. I laughed them off, but the questions sat heavy in the air. At one point, he reached over, his hand sliding up my thigh. My pulse jumped. He smiled at me, sharp and eager. "Pull over," he whispered. The road was empty, a strip of cracked asphalt bordered by endless woods. I slowed, headlights slicing through the trees. We kissed, his hands gripping tighter, almost bruising. And then, a sudden sharp sting in my chest. I froze, breath shattering. When I pulled back, I saw it, the glint of metal in his hand. A knife. "Daniel, what the hell?" "Shh," he whispered, eyes wide, almost luminous in the dashboard light. "Don't ruin it." This is the best part. Terror surged through me. I shoved at him, felt the blade slice across my arm. Hot blood, metallic smell, adrenaline pounding in my ears. "Stop. Are you insane?" His voice rose, giddy and trembling. "Don't fight it, Claire. Just let go. You'll see, it's beautiful." His face twisted into something I barely recognized. Not Daniel. Not anyone human. His eyes gleamed with fever, his mouth slack with ecstasy. I fought. I fought harder than I ever had in my life. My hands locked on his wrist, the knife wavering between us. The car seemed to close in, air thick with sweat and copper. And then, his grip slipped. The blade cut across his own throat. The sound was wet and choking, a gurgle that still rings in my ears. His eyes widened in disbelief, as if even he hadn't expected the story to end this way. Blood poured hot and fast, soaking his shirt. I screamed. I don't remember pulling the knife free. Don't remember the next few frantic motions. All I know is that when I stopped, he was slumped against the seat, his body horribly still. The woods swallowed the night around us. My breath came ragged, shallow, 1,000 shards tearing through my chest. I wanted to call someone, to scream for help. But the thought of explaining, of standing there with blood on my hands and his body in my car, paralyzed me. In blind panic, I drove. Miles blurred beneath me, headlights carving tunnels through the dark. Finally, I reached a river overlook, a cliff where the guardrail bent and the water below churned black. My hands shook as I dragged him into the driver's seat, shoved the car into neutral and pushed. The vehicle rolled, slow at first, then faster, before tipping over the edge. The crash echoed once, then the splash. The river swallowed him whole. I stood there, blood seeping through my shirt, my skin clammy with terror, and then I left. Weeks passed. I waited for sirens, for news, for missing posters with his face staring back at me. Nothing came. It was as if Daniel Rains had never existed. But I know he did. I see him when I close my eyes. I feel the pressure of his hands, the weight of his stare, the glint of the knife. I hear his whisper in the empty hours of the night. Don't ruin it. This is the best part. I tried to convince myself it was over, that I was safe, but safety doesn't come back once it's broken. My locks feel flimsy. My walls feel thin. Every stranger's glance on the street feels like recognition. And sometimes, this is the part I can't explain, sometimes I wake in the dark, heart racing, and I swear I hear water dripping. I don't own a leaky faucet. There is no water near my bed. But the sound is there, rhythmic, insistent, drip, drip, drip. And in the corner of the room, where the shadows are thickest, I sometimes see the outline of a figure, tall, still, watching. When I blink, it's gone, but I know. Daniel didn't disappear into the river. He stayed, and he's waiting. I never believed in gut feelings. People always made them sound mystical, like your body was some kind of compass that pointed toward danger. My mother said it often enough when I was growing up. Listen to your instincts. They'll save you one day. But I thought she was speaking in the language of people who didn't have time for facts, for evidence, for logic. I didn't want to live by feelings. I wanted to live by things I could explain. That belief carried me out of Ashton, Illinois, the small town I was born into, where the streets closed down by 9 o'clock and everyone knew when you sneezed. I moved 2 hours away to Riverside when I was 20, into a shoebox apartment above a laundromat where the hum of dryers filled my nights. I worked part-time at a bookstore, studied psychology at the community college, and built a life out of routine. My mom still called me every Sunday, her voice tired from long shifts at the diner but warm, always reminding me to eat, to rest, to stay alert. She worried because I'd never been much of a risk taker. She said people like me, always thinking, never feeling, were the ones who didn't notice when danger stood right in front of them. She was right. I met Adrian Wells at a party I hadn't wanted to attend. It was the kind of student gathering where the music was too loud for real conversation, where the kitchen smelled like beer-soaked floors and somebody's cheap perfume clung in the air. I stood by the rain-streaked window, watching drops crawl down the glass, wishing I could vanish. That's when a voice brushed against me. "You look like you're about to disappear." I turned. He stood tall, hair dark and curling slightly at the edges, his smile almost theatrical but not unkind. His presence was steady, cutting through the chaos like he was immune to it. "I'm not great at parties," I admitted, feeling my cheeks warm. "That makes two of us," he said, though he looked like the type of man who commanded any room he entered. Still, he leaned against the wall beside me as though we'd come there together. His name was Adrian Wells. He told me he was a photographer. I like catching people when they don't know they're being watched. That's when they're most real. Something in the way he said it unsettled me, but I pushed the thought aside because when he asked about me, his eyes locked onto mine like I was the only one in the room. We ended up sitting on the floor, trading stories about books, about our families, about how lonely it could feel to want more from life. When the party thinned and the rain eased, he walked me outside beneath the orange wash of streetlights. "Can I see you again?" he asked, and there was a crack of boyish sincerity in his voice. I said yes. Our first date was at a cafe hidden on a quiet corner. Adrian said he loved places like that, tucked away, overlooked. The cafe smelled of coffee grounds and cinnamon, with mismatched chairs and soft yellow bulbs that seemed to slow down time. Talking to him felt effortless, like he'd been waiting all along for me to sit across from him, and in the weeks that followed, he became a fixture in my life. He showed up at the bookstore with coffee, left notes under my door, called at night just to hear me speak. "You're different," he'd say, studying me like I was a puzzle he'd finally solved. "You're not shallow like the others. You're real." I wanted to believe it. For someone who had spent most of her life blending in, those words lit me from the inside out. But Adrian's devotion was heavy, and slowly its weight pressed down. It began with small questions. "Who were you texting?" asked lightly, eyes sharp. "Why didn't you answer my call?" Followed by a smile that didn't reach his gaze. If I was late, his voice cooled. "You don't value my time." When I mentioned meeting friends, he asked, "Why do you need them when you have me?" I brushed it off, telling myself this was love, intensity, what everyone said relationships were supposed to be. But the unease grew like a shadow. At the library, I once caught him watching people, not casually, but with a piercing intensity, as if he was dissecting them. "What are you doing?" I whispered. "Observing," he murmured with a grin. "Everyone has patterns. You can know what they're thinking if you look closely enough." The chill that slid down my spine stayed with me. He liked to talk about crime, about vanishing. Watching a horror movie once, he said, "Isn't it amazing how someone can just disappear? One moment here, the next gone." His eyes lingered on me too long. When I recoiled, he laughed. "Relax, I'm joking." At his apartment, he showed me a drawer lined with knives. He stroked the blades like a collector. "Each one has a story, but they haven't written their real story yet." I tried to steady my voice. "Adrian, that's disturbing." His smile curled. "Why would I hurt my muse?" The word muse clung to me like a stain. The night in the park stripped away any illusions I still held. He drove us far from the city, down dark winding roads to a desolate place where trees leaned heavy and the air smelled of damp leaves and metal. The park was abandoned, playground rusting, swings creaking faintly in the breeze. "Special places inspire me," Adrian whispered, as he drew me deeper into the shadows. His hand brushed mine, but the touch felt possessive, not tender. We stopped beneath an old oak. The night was still, the silence oppressive. Then his voice lowered. "You know how fragile life is? One push, one fall, and everything ends. No one would ever know." Adrian stopped. "You're scaring me." My voice cracked. He smiled faintly, brushing my cheek with fingers that felt like ice. "I'm just sharing thoughts. You're my muse. Without you, I'm nothing." When I tried to step back, his grip seized my arm hard enough to bruise. In an instant, his hand was on my throat, shoving me against the oak. The bark gouged my back, rough and unyielding. Cold air burned my lungs as his grip clamped tighter. Iron and unshakable, the smell of wet earth rose sharp around me, damp seeping into my shoes as my heels scraped desperately against the ground. My fingers clawed at his wrist, nails tearing skin, but he didn't flinch. His face hovered inches from mine, eyes lit with fever. "I could make you disappear right now," he whispered, breath hot against my ear. My chest screamed for air. Darkness clawed at the edges of my vision. In a final wild surge, I drove my knee hard into his crotch. He groaned, grip faltering. I shoved against him and tore free, the bark ripping a scratch down my spine as I stumbled away. The world spun as I bolted through the trees. Branches whipped my face, tore my arms. Mud splashed underfoot, cold seeping into my socks. Behind me, laughter, his laughter, echoed through the woods, high, sharp, mocking. "Run, little Muse." I burst onto the road, legs trembling, lungs shredding with every breath. Headlights washed over me. I stumbled, waving frantically until a car slowed. An elderly couple helped me inside. Shaking, I realized my hand was clenched around something small, hard. When I opened my palm, a single button caked in mud rested there. Torn from Adrian's jacket in my desperate struggle, the couple took me to the police, where I spilled everything in sobs. But the officer's doubt cut like a blade. "He strangled you, then just let you go?" one asked. "I hit him. He was going to kill me." I insisted, voice breaking. They wrote it down but didn't believe. I left hollow, button still clutched in my pocket. I returned home. My mother insisted I move back to Ashton, and I did, leaving Riverside and Adrian behind. Years blurred. I finished school, found work, tried to breathe normally again, but the button remained. Sometimes I'd find it where I hadn't left it, on my bedside table, on the floor by my bed. I told myself it was my own forgetfulness. Still, I could never throw it away. Then one night, years later, Adrian's face appeared on my TV, a dating show rerun. His smile charming, his laugh magnetic. Then the anchor's voice. Adrian Wells, later convicted of multiple murders, appeared on this show just months before his first known victim. The world tilted. The man who had called me his muse, who whispered he could make me vanish, he had done it. To others, I couldn't breathe. The button felt heavy in my palm. And now when I lie in bed at night, the laundromat hum gone, the room too quiet, shadows move where they shouldn't. From the corner, a whisper slithers. "You're special." Last night, I swore I heard the soft tap, tap, tap against my window glass. The same rhythm Adrian once made with his finger when he watched me talk. I pulled the blanket to my chin, heart hammering. I keep telling myself he's gone, that he can't reach me. But the button waits on my bedside table no matter where I hide it, and the shadows bend too long, too close. I don't know if Adrian ever left me. I don't know if he's dead or if he's something else now. But I know one thing, whatever he is, he's still watching. And one day, when the shadows move too far, I won't be fast enough to run. I never wanted to be seen, not really. Not in the way that Lucas Brenner saw me. Most people don't notice billing clerks. We're shadows behind paper stacks, invisible cogs turning to keep hospitals running. That's what I liked about the job. You clock in, you file, you process insurance codes that no one outside our office understands, and you disappear into the hum of fluorescent lights. After my divorce, it was exactly what I needed, a life too small for anyone to interfere with. But sometimes I think invisibility was only an illusion. Like the night of January 14th, 2019, when the city of Buffalo was sealed in ice so thick the street lamps bent under its weight. I left the Mercy Hospital billing office at 565 Abbott Road close to midnight, clutching my coat around me as the wind peeled tears out of my eyes. I thought I saw a man standing at the end of the corridor, just for a second, near the glow of the vending machines. But when I blinked, the space was empty. Maybe my mind was playing tricks. Maybe I only imagined him. I shook it off, but my steps echoed differently after that, like the sound bounced off someone else's shoes. When I pushed through the lobby doors, that's when I first saw him clearly. Lucas Brenner, jacket half-zipped, hair damp from snow. He leaned against the vending machine, holding a paper cup, steam curling in front of his face. He smiled when our eyes met. A crooked smile that felt like it had been waiting for me. "Long night?" he asked, his voice low, like we already shared something private. I should have kept walking, but instead I smiled back barely and nodded. That was enough. Lucas had a way of appearing like an afterthought. A paramedic who somehow had the time to linger. The hospital ran on odd hours, so maybe it made sense he crossed my path often. Still, it felt like more than coincidence. Soon he was everywhere, holding doors, bringing tea, asking questions that seemed casual until I realized how precise they were. "Do you still leave your bathroom light on when you sleep?" he asked one night, handing me a thermos. I froze. I had never told him that. I wasn't sure I'd told anyone. He smiled, that crooked smile, and said, "Most people do when they're alone. Makes the place feel less empty." I wanted to laugh it off, to believe he was making a lucky guess, but inside I felt something slide cold against my spine. The notes started appearing on my desk, written in neat block letters. "Don't forget to eat lunch. May sometimes a thermos of tea waited at the time clock with a sticky note. Your favorite." Carla, my coworker, teased me at first. "He's sweet on you," she'd grin, watching Lucas wave from down the hall. But one night in the break room, her expression changed. She stirred her coffee slowly, not looking at me. "He's around too much, May. Doesn't he ever sleep?" I didn't answer, because I was already asking myself the same thing. It escalated in ways I couldn't excuse. One snowy evening, I pulled into my apartment lot and saw headlights behind me. Lucas stepped out of his truck carrying groceries. "Thought you might not have stocked up before the storm," he said, pressing the bag into my arms. Inside were eggs, bread, and the brand of tea I drank every morning. "How did you know where I lived?" I asked, trying to make it sound light, like a joke. He shrugged. "You mentioned the street once," I guessed. I couldn't remember mentioning it, but maybe I had. Maybe. I must have. That's what I told myself as I thanked him. My voice too bright. The worst was his phone. He left it on the cafeteria table once while he helped an older patient fill out forms. The screen lit up and I saw a framed picture of us, me, smiling in the cafeteria sunlight, Lucas beside me, his arm angled like he'd held the camera out. But I had no memory of that photo ever being taken. My stomach flipped as though the floor had shifted under me. At night, my intercom buzzed with no one on the other end. Mornings, I found my windshield scraped clean of ice, though I hadn't touched it. One morning, I woke to find a single glove on my doorstep. My glove, one I'd lost weeks earlier. When I asked Lucas if he knew anything about it, he laughed low and quiet. "I'm just looking out for you. May, you'd freeze without me." Something in the way he said it made me want to lock every window twice. Then came the blackout. The hospital lights went out in a single snap. Every corridor plunged into silence. The hum of machines dead, voices sharp with panic. The emergency generators failed. I stayed behind to secure files, fumbling in the dark. The sound of my breath louder than paper rustling. When I reached the stairwell, a flashlight beam cut through the dark. Lucas stood there. "You don't need to go home tonight," he said, voice steady, rehearsed. "Stay with me. Forever." The way he said forever felt like a hand pressed against my throat. I shoved past him, boots sliding on the ice, knees cracking against pavement. Blood ran warm down my legs. The sleet stung like needles, but I kept running. A second flashlight beam appeared, another security guard. "Hey, you okay?" he shouted. I collapsed against him, sobbing. I left Buffalo within the week. Took leave from Mercy, packed what I could. Moved in with my sister across state lines, but safety doesn't come with distance. Not when someone has already mapped you. The packages started arriving. No return address. Small, deliberate, a scarf I'd lost. My favorite brand of tea, my hospital ID badge, which I'd thought was gone for good. My sister told me it was coincidence. But coincidence doesn't carry your scent. Coincidence doesn't know your taste, and sometimes, when the wind rattles my window at night, I feel him, not watching but pressing, the way he did that night in the stairwell. The scariest part isn't wondering if Lucas is still following me. It's asking myself the question I can't shake. What if he never had to follow me at all? What if he's already here? When I moved in with my sister, I told myself it was temporary, a place to breathe. A pause button on everything I didn't want to admit was happening. Her house was small, a split level with creaky stairs and wallpaper that peeled at the corners, but she filled it with warmth. Lila always had a candle burning, vanilla or cinnamon, and soft music playing in the background. The first week, she insisted I keep my phone turned off during meals. Made me sit across from her at the kitchen table like we were kids again. "You need normal. May," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "He can't touch you here." I wanted to believe her. For a while, I almost did. But even in her house, I couldn't shake the feeling of being observed. When I brushed my teeth at night, I'd catch my reflection flickering in the mirror like my face had moved a fraction of a second slower than my body. The window blinds shifted when there was no draft. And sometimes when I woke in the dark, I swore I heard the faint click of my sister's intercom, just like the one in Buffalo. The packages began arriving again. The first was small, wrapped in brown paper. Inside was my scarf, folded neatly, smelling faintly of the detergent I used before I left Buffalo. The second came 3 days later, a box of my favorite tea, the brand Lucas always brought. The third was worse. Inside was my old hospital ID badge, the clip bent, my picture staring back at me like an accusation. Lila's face went pale when I showed her. "This has to be someone messing with you," she said, too quickly, as if speed could make it true. "It can't be him. He doesn't even know where I live." But in the silence that followed, I felt it. The weight of what neither of us wanted to say. Of course he knew. He always knew. I started seeing him in places I couldn't prove. At the grocery store, a man with his walk turned down an aisle just before I reached it. In the parking lot, headlights lingered behind me too long. One night, I woke certain there was someone standing at the foot of my bed, only to find nothing when I switched on the lamp. "You're unraveling, May," I whispered to myself, gripping the sheet until my knuckles hurt. Get a grip. But even my whispers didn't sound like my own voice anymore. One evening, Lila asked me to grab something from the basement. The old pull-chain bulb flickered when I turned it on, shadows jerking against the cement walls. That's when I saw it on the shelf behind the paint cans, a thermos, silver dented with a strip of duct tape around the lid. My heart lurched. It was the same kind Lucas used to leave for me. I grabbed it, hands trembling. It was empty, but the faint smell of chamomile clung to the inside. When I brought it upstairs, Lila frowned. "What's that?" "It's his," I whispered. My throat felt raw. "He's been here. He's inside the house." She shook her head too fast, her voice tight. "No, May, it's just an old thermos. Probably Dad's. You're seeing patterns. You want to see them. But how could it smell like chamomile?" After that, sleep became impossible. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a footstep. Every shadow in the hallway stretched too long. I stopped showering unless Lila was home, convinced that if I closed my eyes, I'd open them to find him standing in the steam. And then one night I caught her, Lila, in the kitchen, whispering into the phone. "She's getting worse," she said, her back to me. "I don't know how much longer I can do this. She keeps saying he's here, but I haven't seen anything. Maybe she needs—" She stopped when she saw me, her eyes wide. "Who were you talking to?" I asked. "No one," she said. "Work, just work." But her voice shook. And for the first time, I wondered if she was telling me the truth. The packages kept coming. One morning, I opened the front door and found not a box, but a single envelope. Inside was a Polaroid photograph. Me, standing at the sink in my sister's kitchen, my hair wet, wrapped in a towel. I dropped the picture like it had burned me. "This proves it," I told Lila, shoving the photo toward her. "He's inside. He's watching us," but she only stared at me, her face pale, lips pressed thin. "May, listen to yourself. You're not even sure what you've seen." Her words stung because part of me knew she was right. I couldn't tell anymore what was real. I couldn't tell if Lucas was outside, inside, or in my own head. The breaking point came during another storm. The power flickered, then died, plunging the house into black. I lit candles with shaking hands, every shadow leaning too far, stretching inhumanly against the walls. Then, from the stairwell, a flashlight beam. "You don't need to be scared, May." My blood froze. That voice, "Lucas, you don't need to leave. Stay here, with me, forever." The words were the same as in Buffalo, down to the rhythm. My chest seized as I stumbled backward, knocking a candle over, wax spilling across the floor. "Lila," I screamed, but no answer came. I ran for the door, slipping on the rug, knees splitting open again, blood hot against my skin. The beam followed me, steady, unhurried, like he knew I couldn't escape. I tore the door open and stumbled into the storm. The snow lashed my face, blinding. Headlights cut across the yard, a car pulling in, tires crunching over ice. Lila stepped out, grocery bags in hand. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "May, what the hell are you doing?" I turned back toward the house. The stairwell window glowed faintly, but there was no flashlight now, no figure. Just darkness. "He was here," I gasped. My voice sounded like a stranger's. "You didn't see him?" Lila shook her head slowly. and in that moment I realized she didn't believe me anymore. The days after blurred together. Lila begged me to see someone. A therapist, a doctor, anyone. But how could I explain what I couldn't even prove to myself? Because sometimes I thought I caught glimpses of Lucas's crooked smile in reflective glass, or felt his hand graze my shoulder in a crowded street. Other times I wondered if I was chasing a ghost I had invented, if I was carrying him with me, letting him live behind my eyes. But the packages never stopped. The last one was the worst. Inside was a single key. My apartment key from Buffalo, the one I'd lost the night of the blackout. Now I lie awake at night listening to the house settle, the wind rattle the windows. I tell myself I'm safe, that Lucas can't be here, that it's all in my head. But then I hear it, the faint buzz of the intercom that doesn't exist in this house. The scrape of a windshield being cleared outside, and I ask myself the question that keeps me cold even under the heaviest blankets. What if he's not following me at all? What if he never left? What if he's been inside me this whole time, waiting for the moment I let my guard down? I always told myself I was good at working in the dark. Not metaphorical darkness, though that too, but the literal kind, the kind that settles over the office when most of the city has shut down. I had a ritual for nights like that. A chipped mug with a handle I glued back on twice, filled with mint tea that tasted faintly metallic from the tap water, and a playlist I called Focus Mode that hadn't changed since college. It started with one soft piano track, then swelled into restless ambient sounds. Rain loops, muffled city noise, nothing with lyrics. I hated silence. Silence left room for my father's voice. That October night, October 13th, 2021, the ritual sat on my desk in front of me. Tea gone lukewarm. Spotify looping track 3, a deadline gnawing at my shoulders. Eclipse branding, 4420 Belmont Avenue, was the kind of glass and concrete building that looked sleek in daylight but turned oppressive after dark. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected me in pieces. My own face looked thinner, my posture smaller, when I glimpsed it in the conference room glass. And then there was Evan Mercer. He'd hovered more and more in recent weeks, leaning on the edge of my cubicle, cracking jokes asking about my projects like he cared. I used to think I blended into the background some when people's eyes slid past, but Evan had a way of pinning me down with attention. He teased my playlists, picked up my mug once and sniffed. Mint tea? That's grandma stuff, Whitlow. He was smiling when he said it, and when I laughed too quickly, he added softer. It suits you, though. Calming, you're steady, reliable. Words that landed where my father's barbs had lived for years. That night, he was 2 desks away, sleeves rolled up, typing furiously like we were the only 2 left holding the company together. I knew I should pack up, but when he stayed, I stayed. That's how it worked with him. The blackout hit at 11:47 p.m. sharp. It wasn't gradual. 1 second, the office hummed alive with computers and HVAC. The next, everything choked off, silence crashing down like a curtain. Emergency lights flickered red, exit signs glowed faintly, and the smell of overheated wires curled into the air. I froze with my cursor mid-drag. Evan leaned back, raised his hands. Well, that's a sign, huh? His voice filled the sudden void too easily, like he'd been waiting. The storm outside pressed its palms to the windows, rain streaking the glass. From where I sat, I could still see the neon of Belmont Avenue glowing. That detail snagged at me immediately. If the city grid had failed, why was the block outside still lit? I stood smoothing my skirt, my hands shaky. Guess we should head out. Evan walked over slowly, slipping his jacket from his chair. You're nervous. It's weird, that's all. He set the jacket over my shoulders, fingers brushing longer than they needed to. Then don't leave yet. Stay with me. Maybe the blackout's a good excuse. At first it felt almost intimate, like a secret world, just us and the red hum of emergency lights. We joked. He teased me about the mug again, about my playlist now useless without Wi-Fi. He leaned in and whispered, maybe the blackout is a sign. I laughed, but it broke halfway. His words landed heavier than a joke should. After a while, I tried the stairwell door. The handle rattled, but it wouldn't move. I yanked harder. Nothing. It's stuck, I said, my voice too loud in the dark. Evan stepped behind me close enough that I felt his breath. Then don't go that way. It's safer here. Trust me. The exit sign above us dimmed just for a moment as though agreeing. I blinked hard. Maybe my eyes were adjusting. Maybe. We went back into the main office. My desk looked wrong under the crimson wash of the backup lights. Files stacked like small monuments, tea mug casting an oversized shadow. Evan sat on the corner of the desk across from mine, smiling like we were on a date instead of trapped. He asked about my childhood. He rarely did that. What was it like growing up in Arizona? You ever miss it? I shrugged, fiddling with my mug. Not really. Too many ghosts. Family ghosts. His tone was careful, fishing. Something like that. He leaned in, expression soft. I bet you were the kid who never got enough credit. Am I right? Always trying, never being told it was enough. My chest tightened. Why would you say that? He smiled low and sure. Because I see you, Clara. I notice what other people miss. For a second, warmth bloomed in me. Then his words replayed in my head and the warmth turned sharp. Notice what other people miss. Like surveillance. Like study time stuttered after that. 12:10 a.m., then 12:26 a.m. My watch ticked but felt too loud. I caught my reflection in the conference glass again and my stomach dropped. The reflection tilted its head before I did. I shot upright. Did you see that? Evan's grin flickered. See what? He tilted his head too, mimicking but just slightly off, like he was in on the joke with someone else I couldn't see. I sat down fast, gripping the mug until it bit my palm. The mint smell turned sour. Minutes later I heard it. My own voice, soft and close. Clara, I froze, tea halfway to my lips. Did you hear that? Evan tilted toward me, eyes wide with manufactured innocence. Hear what? My pulse skittered. I wanted to believe him. I wanted him to be my anchor. But his smile stretched too wide, like skin pulled over something waiting. By 1 a.m., the air pressed heavy. Evan paced, muttering. His lips moved in a rhythm too measured, like he was repeating lines rehearsed somewhere else. What are you saying? I whispered. He stopped, smile snapping back on. Just thinking. Don't worry, Whitlow, my stomach turned. He'd called me Clara earlier tenderly, but now it was Whitlow again, like he was shifting roles, recalibrating. The storm rattled the windows harder, and something in me broke. I grabbed my chair, lifted it, and smashed it against the glass. The crash was deafening, shards raining down. Cold air tore in, rain slicing my arms as I crawled through. Evan didn't move to stop me. He just stood back, head tilted, smile stretching unnatural. I dropped onto Belmont Avenue pavement, knees cracking, rain blinding me. For 1 second, freedom tasted real. Then I looked back. Evan stood in the shattered window, crimson exit light flickering behind him. His smile was still there, but his eyes weren't his anymore. The days after felt like someone had shaken my life and left the pieces scattered on the floor. I went to work, I came home, I slept in fits, but everything blurred. Time didn't move cleanly anymore. The hours after the blackout bled into each other like ink spreading on damp paper. People kept saying things like, "Crazy storm last week, huh?" Or "Guess you got stuck late." Nobody mentioned the blackout. Nobody mentioned Evan. I didn't either. I couldn't. Instead, I told myself I'd just keep moving forward. I even bought a new tin of my mint tea at the corner store, thinking maybe the ritual would steady me. But the first night I made it, I gagged after the first sip. It didn't taste like mint anymore, it tasted scorched, like overheated wires. I poured it out, shoved the mug in the back of a cabinet, my playlist too. I opened Spotify, tried to let the piano track soothe me like it always had, but the notes sounded warped, slightly off pitch, like someone humming beneath them. By track 3, I slammed the laptop shut. The ordinary was turning against me. I told myself it was just trauma. I'd smashed a window, for God's sake. I'd bled down Belmont Avenue. My brain was scrambling, that's all. But then came the first intrusion I couldn't explain away. I was riding the bus home, forehead pressed to the glass. My reflection was ghostly in the dark outside. I blinked and the reflection smiled. I wasn't smiling. I jerked back, heart hammering, but the glass only showed rain sliding down, my own pale face staring. The second time it happened, I was brushing my teeth. Foam in my mouth, head fogged with exhaustion. I looked up and my reflection wasn't brushing at all. It was standing still, lips curled upward, teeth bared like it had been waiting. The toothbrush clattered into the sink. I didn't pick it up. The third time was worse. I was in line at a crowded coffee shop clutching my wallet when a voice behind me leaned close, breath warm on my ear. "Clara." I spun around, nearly dropping my wallet. No one was there. The people in line stared at me like I was crazy. I went home shaking. Sometimes in the quiet, I could still hear Evan's words. "I see you." I notice what other people miss. Back then, they had sounded like attention. Now they sounded like possession. At night, the dreams came. Always the office. Always the blackout. The emergency lights pulsed and Evan's figure waited in the conference room, smiling too wide. Sometimes he spoke, "It's safer here. Trust me." Sometimes he just stared until my skin itched. I woke with my arms burning where the glass had cut me, even though the wounds had healed. Weeks slid by, and I thought maybe I could bury it. Maybe it would fade if I stopped feeding it. But the city kept reminding me. One night on Belmont Avenue, I passed the building itself. Eclipse branding, 4420 Belmont. From the outside, it looked normal. Bright windows, people inside working late. But when I glanced up at the third floor, my floor, every light was out. Just one window flickered red with the pulse of an exit sign. And in the glass, for a split second, I saw Evan, watching, smiling. I stumbled back into traffic, horns blaring. When I looked again, the window was empty. I stopped trusting myself. I stopped trusting mirrors, buses, crowds. I covered the bathroom mirror with a towel. I washed dishes staring at the wall. Still, the whispers found me. Once in the grocery store, I picked up a box of tea bags and heard it clear as breath. "Don't bother. You know how it tastes now." I dropped the box, ran out without paying. Another time, lying in bed, I felt the weight of someone sitting on the edge. My eyes snapped open, but no one was there. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Evan. "You left too soon." I deleted it, but the message hung in me like a hook. I started thinking about the blackout itself, about how the rest of the block had glowed while only our building had gone dark. It felt like a seal, like a trap. Like whatever lived in that building had shut the world out so it could keep me in. And the part that scared me most wasn't Evan. It was the thought that Evan might never have been the point. That he was just a mask. That something deeper, hungrier, had been waiting in the dark all along. Maybe it used him. Maybe it wore him. Maybe it slid into him the way it was sliding into me now. Last night I woke at 11:47 p.m. sharp. My phone glowed with the time. My apartment was silent except for the hum of the fridge. But when I stood, the air was wrong. Heavier. My tea mug sat on the counter where I'd shoved it weeks ago, only now it was full. Steam curling up. The smell was metallic, electric. I didn't pour it. I didn't touch it. The Spotify app on my laptop opened itself. The piano track played, warped, like someone whispering under it. My name over and over. "Clara. Clara. Clara." And in the dark window above the sink, my reflection smiled. I always told myself I was good at working in the dark. Turns out, I was just learning how to live here. I never believed silence could have weight until I carried it inside me, heavy enough to grind down my ribs each time I breathed. When I drove west out of Illinois in February of 2019, I told myself I was leaving the past behind in the rearview mirror. My little Corolla was stuffed with mismatched furniture, cardboard boxes collapsing from too many miles, and the stubborn hope that Colorado might give me something like a clean slate. My mother and I hadn't spoken in years. My father was a ghost even when he was alive, and Chicago had become a place where every street reminded me of what I'd lost. Pueblo wasn't glamorous, but it was far enough, quiet enough, anonymous enough. I'd landed a position at St. Mary's Regional Hospital, 1100 West 10th Street, working nights, shifts no one else wanted, the kind that chewed through your body and made time blur. For me, that sounded perfect. Exhaustion was better than remembering. The first week passed in a fog of fluorescent lights and antiseptic. Nights blurred together, vitals, charts, IVs, and the metallic hum of machines. I learned the rhythms of the ER, the endless parade of drunks, the sudden silences when trauma rolled in, the smell of snow-soaked coats dripping in the waiting room. And then there was the night the snow hit like fists. The glass doors rattled in their frames, sleet stinging like handfuls of thrown gravel. I stood by the bay waiting for an ambulance when they burst through. 2 paramedics rolling in a stretcher, voices clipped and professional. One of them had the kind of presence that hit you like static. Not just his height or his sharp jawline, though he had those, but something heavier. Like gravity bent sharper around him. That was the first time I saw Gabriel Horn. He glanced at me, not in the distracted way most medics did when they dumped off patients, but straight on, his eyes locking into mine as if I'd already said something worth answering. "First winter out west?" he asked, his voice low, carrying over the siren still wailing faintly outside. I nodded. "Yeah, snow doesn't let up here, does it?" "It doesn't," he said, and gave a smile that wasn't warm so much as knowing, like he'd already decided something about me. I should have looked away. Instead, I held his gaze, pinned, and something in my chest tightened in a way that felt too much like recognition. The first nights, it was harmless. Coffee at the vending machine when we were both running on fumes. Small talk in the hall. He had a quiet intensity, the kind of person who made you feel as though every word you said was underlined. After years of feeling invisible, it was a relief. By the second week, I noticed he lingered. He'd be leaning outside the break room, waiting like he'd just happened to be there. He asked questions, not just casual ones, but ones that slid beneath your skin. Did I miss my family? Did I ever feel like the city was watching me? What did I dream about? It felt less like conversation and more like being peeled layer by layer. But I let him, because sometimes being seen, even if it hurt, was better than being forgotten. The first strange moment came 3 weeks later. We were sitting in the hospital cafeteria at 3 a.m., the only ones there drinking stale coffee. He leaned back, eyes half-lidded, and said, "I like the way your kitchen light flickers when you boil water. It's intimate." I froze. "I never told you that," I said carefully. He smiled slow. "Maybe you mentioned it. You get tired, you forget." But I hadn't. I told myself maybe I had. Maybe I'd let something slip. But a cold knot lodged itself deep in my stomach, one that didn't ease even after we went back to work. Jenna, one of the night nurses, liked to tease. She was older, sharp-witted, the kind who knew everyone's business before you knew it yourself. "Your boyfriend's got eyes everywhere," she said once, after Gabriel brought me coffee out of nowhere. I laughed with her, but her tone stuck with me, because beneath her smirk was something else, a flicker of unease. The patients noticed before I admitted anything to myself. One confused old man, admitted for pneumonia, grabbed my wrist one night. His fingers trembled. "Tell your husband to stop standing in the corner," he whispered, eyes wide with fear. I glanced around. The room was empty. Another woman told me she woke in the night to hear a man's voice promising her safety, whispering, "She belongs to me." I didn't tell Gabriel that right away. But when I finally did, his only response was to smile. "I'm keeping you safe, Elena," he said. His voice was low, steady. "From what hunts in the dark." I should have ended it then, but I didn't. Because when you're lonely, words that should feel like threats sometimes sound like protection. By March, Pueblo was still buried under snow. My apartment on Union Avenue was small, drafty, a second-floor walk-up with windows that rattled in the wind. I started waking at night certain someone was outside my door. Once I found my window cracked open when I knew I'd locked it. I wanted to believe I was just tired. Nurses make mistakes, forget things. That's what I told myself. But the feeling of being watched never left, and then came the blackout. It was a Tuesday night. I was charting vitals when the lights flickered once, twice, then went dark. The generator stuttered, hummed, failed. For a moment, the hospital was a cave. The silence was immense. Then I heard it. Footsteps echoing down the corridor. Too measured to be panicked staff. "Too close, Elena." His voice soft, almost tender. "Gabriel." My stomach lurched. I turned, heart hammering. At the end of the hall, a shadow stood, taller than the darkness behind it, shoulders squared, head tilted, watching me. "Elena," the voice came again. "Don't run." I ran, through stairwells, the echo of my own footsteps colliding with whispers I couldn't escape. His voice seemed to come from every direction, soft then sharp. "You're mine. You're safe with me. Don't fight." My lungs burned. Every door I tried was locked, except the one I shouldn't have been able to open. The emergency exit. The metal bar screamed as I slammed against it, bursting out into the night. Snow hit my face like shards of glass. The cold clawed at my skin. I stumbled down the steps half blind until I saw them, red and blue lights flashing against the snow. A police cruiser sat idling, a cop stepping out startled as I collapsed into the snow in front of him. I don't remember what I said. Maybe I screamed. Maybe nothing came out at all. All I know is the way my chest heaved, my body shaking so hard I couldn't stop, and the copper taste of blood in my mouth where I'd bitten my tongue. And when they wrapped me in a blanket and led me into the cruiser, I swore I could still hear him. His whisper curling through the dark like smoke. The weeks after that night became a blur of snow, fluorescent lights, and the kind of exhaustion that seeps into your bones. My apartment on Union Avenue was stripped clean, not violently, not in any way that made sense, but things were missing. My favorite mug, a stack of notebooks, even the small salt lamp I used to leave on at night. No forced entry, no signs of tampering, nothing that could explain why I felt more exposed than ever. I tried therapy. Dr. Hayworth was patient, a thin woman with wire-frame glasses and a calm voice that felt like it belonged in another universe. "You're experiencing trauma," she said gently. "Even if it didn't come from one obvious source, your body remembers it." I nodded, but the truth was worse. I was beginning to question what trauma even was. Was it him? The patients? Or the shadows that seemed to move of their own accord? At the hospital, whispers persisted. A middle-aged man admitted for dehydration told me he saw a man standing at the end of his bed, always watching. "He doesn't speak," the man said, "but I feel him there." Jenna noticed my jitteriness. "Elena, you okay?" she asked one night, her hand brushing mine over the chart. "You look like you've been seeing ghosts." I laughed, but it caught in my throat. "I'm fine," I said. She didn't push, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. The way humans notice what they cannot name. It got worse at home. The nights were no longer empty. I could hear the subtle thrum of movement in the apartment, the faint scraping of shoes against hardwood, whispering just beyond comprehension. I'd wake in the middle of the night to see shadows pooling in corners, shifting too fluidly to be cast by streetlights. I started leaving lights on, then turned them off again. The snow outside reflected moonlight, painting the room in shifting gray. Sometimes I thought I saw him, Gabriel, in the reflection of the glass, just standing there, head tilted as if observing me. I tried recording sounds, keeping logs, rationalizing. But logic failed me when I woke to the sound of my own name, soft, caressing, Elena. Death never frightened me. What always terrified me was the silence before it, the way a room seemed to conspire, the hush becoming too deliberate as though the walls themselves were waiting. That was the silence I carried into Marigold Care Center on the night of January 14th, 2016, the night when the storm began and never ended. I was 32 then, worn down from double shifts, exhaustion stitched into every step. I told myself it was money I needed, but the truth was uglier. Guilt is expensive. You pay it back by working until your body gives out, by swallowing sleep and sanity just to quiet the memory of every failure. When my mother died in that apartment, she was alone except for me. I still remember the smell. Boiled cabbage gone sour, the sharp tang of unwashed sheets, and beneath it all the faint rot of something inevitable. My brother was too drunk to answer my calls, too far gone to care. When she gasped her last, I froze. Hours passed before I found the nerve to dial anyone. I left her there, the light of the television flickering over her waxy face. I never forgave myself. Neither did he. The last thing he ever said to me before I cut him loose was, "Don't bother coming back. You only show up when it's too late." That voice followed me like frost clings to glass, and so I worked. I told myself the dying needed me, that easing their passage meant something. But that night, when the storm came down hard enough to shake the windows, I learned I was wrong. I wasn't caring for them. I was hiding inside them, hoping to wash myself clean in their endings. The air outside was brutal, wind howling like a wounded dog, snow hammering the windows in impatient fists. The generator grumbled in the basement like an old man muttering to himself. The halls of Marigold felt tighter than usual, the fluorescent lights buzzing like flies against the silence. Maria, the night nurse, hunched into her cardigan and muttered, "If we lose lights tonight, I swear I'm quitting on the spot." She tried to laugh, but it caught halfway up her throat, Calvin, young and always a little too eager to prove he wasn't afraid, rolled his eyes. Storm will pass. Place is solid. Nothing to worry about. His voice didn't convince even him. They handed me room 12. Gerald Pike. The first time I saw him, I thought of parchment stretched too thin. His skin was pale and tight across his skull, but his eyes, God, his eyes were alive, bright as wet glass. His wheelchair sat beside the bed, perfectly positioned, like he wanted to remind anyone who entered that he wasn't entirely helpless. He smiled when I walked in, a long, slow smile that showed every tooth. Evening, sweetheart. I hate to admit it, but the word hurt. My mother used to call me that. Coming from him, it sounded wrong. Too heavy, too rehearsed. I adjusted his blanket, smoothed the sheet, kept my eyes anywhere but his. He was staring at my throat, at the locket, my mother's locket, the only thing of hers I kept. His smile widened just a little too far, the skin around his lips trembling with the effort. That belonged to someone who didn't forgive you, didn't it? The air left my chest in one violent exhale. There was no way he could know. No one here knew. No one anywhere knew except me and my brother, and he hadn't spoken to me in years. I gripped the locket until the edges dug into my palm. It felt cold, not the cool of metal. Colder. Like ice pressed against the skin. The generator hiccuped, the light above us flickered, and for a moment, I thought I saw something shift in his reflection in the window, a darker shadow inside his shadow. I tried to rationalize. That's what nurses do, we explain away the inexplicable. Delirium, confusion, luck. But every time I entered his room that night, Gerald whispered things he should not know. He recited the exact words of the last fight with my brother. He described the way I found my mother slumped on the couch, the television buzzing blue light against her dead eyes. When I demanded to know how, his voice dropped, guttural and raw. It's not me you're nursing, it's yourself. By midnight, the storm had swollen into a beast. Snow roared against the siding, the building groaned, and the lights blinked like tired eyes. In the break room, Maria clutched her coffee like a talisman. I mean it, if the lights cut, I'm done. I'll walk out. The lights cut at 12:17. The generator growled, then faltered, and darkness devoured the hallways. We lit candles. Their flames trembled in the draft, making shadows jitter and elongate. Calvin burst into the hall, face chalk white. I saw him. He gasped. Gerald, he was standing by the fountain. Just standing there, Maria shook her head. He's in his wheelchair. Don't start. But when I returned to room 12, the wheelchair sat by the bed. Empty. The locket against my chest felt like a shard of ice. By 2 a.m, I could no longer pretend. Gerald's eyes caught the candlelight like lenses. His voice rasped but cut through the storm, through the hum of the failing generator, through my skin. Sit, he commanded. Closer. You keep running, but every hallway leads back here. I fled. My shoes squealed on the linoleum as I turned corner after corner, doors slamming, halls stretching. But he was right. Every path folded in on itself. No matter how far I ran, I came back to room 12. The building twisted like paper in my hands. One hallway stretched endlessly, the lights flickering in a wave down its length like dominoes falling. Another ended in a wall that hadn't been there seconds before. Doors disappeared as I reached for them, vanishing with a sound like inhaled breath. The air tasted metallic, like I'd bitten my tongue. My pulse roared in my ears, and always his voice. Not Gerald's anymore. Layered. Inhuman. Sometimes my brother's slurred venom. You only show up when it's too late. Sometimes Trevor's hiss. The ex who once pressed a knife against my throat. If I can't have you, no one will. The words overlapped until they became a single sound, low and endless, vibrating in my bones. I pressed my hands over my ears until I felt warm wetness seeping down my wrists. I screamed into the dark, and then I did the only thing left. I hurled myself through the stairwell window. Glass burst, slicing my arms. The storm swallowed me whole. Snow clawed at my face, the cold stabbing like knives into my lungs. I stumbled, bleeding, across the parking lot. Headlights appeared at the far end. Relief surged, frantic and hot. I waved my arms, screamed for help. The car slowed. Window sliding down. Gerald's face grinned back at me from the driver's seat. I collapsed, the snow rushing up to embrace me. When I woke, it was morning. They found me curled in the snow outside Marigold's locked doors, frostbitten. skin bandaged where glass had torn me, and Gerald Pike had been dead for 3 days. The paperwork was there. Time of death signed and sealed. His body already buried. No one believed me. I quit the following week. I couldn't smell antiseptic without gagging. Couldn't glance down a white hallway without feeling the walls fold. But leaving didn't end it. Because sometimes, in the sheen of a storefront window, or the warped curve of a subway mirror, I see him. Not standing, not walking, wheeling silently just behind me. The locket on my chest will go cold, so cold my skin burns beneath it. And when I close my eyes at night, I taste blood. I feel the sting of glass. I hear the storm hammering the windows. The storm never ended. It followed me home. I told myself leaving Marigold would end it. That Gerald Pike would stay where he belonged, in the snow, in that wheelchair, in the dark hum of the generator's failing heartbeat. But the storm came with me. At first it was small things. The locket going cold. So cold my skin burned beneath it whenever I thought of him. A chill crawling up my spine when I washed my hands and glanced into the mirror above the sink. A shape behind me, never quite clear, but there. Then came the sounds. Wheels. Soft rubber against tile, creaking spokes. Faint enough that I doubted myself, but constant enough that I couldn't ignore it. At home my floors were wooden, uneven, impossible for wheels to roll smoothly. And yet in the dead hours of night I'd wake to hear them circling my bed, slow, deliberate. I told myself it was the house settling. The neighbors upstairs, my own restless imagination, but the air was always colder after, breath visible in the dark as though the storm had seeped through the walls. I stopped wearing the locket. I buried it in the back of a drawer under socks and folded shirts, but I could still feel its shape against my skin, an invisible weight. At times I swore I heard metal scraping faintly against wood, like the drawer shifting though I hadn't touched it. I tried therapy, tried medication, tried distraction, but how do you medicate against the feeling that the world itself is folding in on you, that reality is paper thin, and someone is scribbling on the other side? One night, walking home from the grocery store, the air shifted. It wasn't snowing, but suddenly the bite of cold against my cheeks was the same as that night. My breath came out in plumes. Streetlights flickered. The bags cut into my palms, cans rattling. I told myself to keep walking. But then I heard it, sweetheart. I never wanted the silence to feel like a threat. But from the moment I stepped inside that house, I knew it wasn't the kind of quiet you could trust. It didn't breathe. It pressed, it pushed. It seemed to fill my ears so fully that I could hear my pulse inside my skull, a hollow throb that told me this place wasn't welcoming me. It was swallowing me. I told myself I was imagining it. After all, I was exhausted and the storm outside wasn't helping. The wind rattled the gutters, a deep moan rising through the siding like something alive. Valentine's Day 2019, and the storm was already being called the worst Montana had seen in decades. Roads slick with black ice, branches breaking under the weight of freezing rain, whole neighborhoods losing power. I'd barely managed to get my car up the hill and into the driveway at 317 Willow Glen Drive before the engine gave a coughing sigh of relief. The house loomed before me, all sharp gables and wide, empty windows that reflected the pale metallic sky. It was the sort of house you'd expect to see in a glossy real estate magazine. But up close, its edges felt wrong, cold in a way that went deeper than architecture. Inside, the air was colder still. Despite the thermostat glowing at a reasonable setting, I hugged my coat tighter as I called out, "Hello?" Only Milo answered. The Labrador, pale gold with a limp from a healing surgery, padded into the foyer. He pressed his nose into my palm and I bent down, relieved to feel the warmth of another living thing. "Hey, buddy," I whispered. "Just you and me, huh?" The first thing I noticed as I explored was how big the place was. Too big. Polished wood floors, staircases that branched like veins, walls hung with tasteful but impersonal art. At least, most of it was impersonal, but one piece stopped me cold. On the wall just past the dining room, there was a photograph, framed in black wood, slightly off-center. At first glance, it was nothing unusual. A black and white portrait of the house itself decades earlier. when the trees were shorter and the paint fresher. But the longer I stared, the more wrong it looked. The windows weren't blank in this picture. In the upstairs window, my upstairs window, there was a shape. A figure, blurred but unmistakable, someone standing there watching. I told myself it was a trick of the old camera, an exposure blur, a shadow of the photographer. But the longer I looked, the more it seemed like the figure's head was turned directly toward me. Across decades, unblinking. I backed away. Milo whined low in his throat, and I forced myself to move on. By the time I carried my overnight bag upstairs, the storm had swallowed what little daylight remained. That was when the power went out. The house dropped into total blackness, the furnace silenced, the refrigerator dead, every hum gone in an instant. My breath misted before me. Milo barked once, sharp, then fell quiet as if waiting for my reaction. I dug out the flashlight from my bag, its beam slicing a narrow path across the high ceilings and dark corners. The shadows seemed heavier here, like they leaned closer when illuminated. I gathered blankets from the couch and told myself to make the best of it. That was when my phone buzzed. I expected a message from Dr. Kelly, maybe checking in from wherever she and her husband had gone. Instead, the screen lit with a number I didn't recognize. Don't believe what he told you. He lies to all of us. I stared at it, confused, then shook my head. Spam. Wrong number. Something ordinary. But a minute later, another came. Ask him about the nights he didn't come home. I frowned, unsettled. My ex had pulled stunts like this before, cryptic, manipulative texts designed to unnerve me. But he didn't have this number. And besides, these weren't his words. They felt colder. When the third message arrived, my stomach dropped. The dog knows. Doesn't he? Doesn't he? I looked at Milo. He sat rigid at the doorway, ears pricked, staring into the hall like something unseen was moving there. I locked the phone, shoved it under the blanket. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself too many things and none of them worked. That night, I barely slept. Every sound the house made felt deliberate. The wood groaning like it was bearing more weight than it should. The creaks in the stairwell when no one was there. The steady drip of melting ice that sometimes sounded like footsteps. By the second night, the storm had sealed the roads, trapping me. The texts escalated into calls. The first time I ignored it. The second I answered, trembling. A woman's voice hissed into my ear. How long have you been with him? I stammered. I don't know who this is. Her voice sharpened. Don't lie to me, Hannah. You think you're special? You think he told you the truth? My breath froze. She knew my name. Who are you? A pause, then a laugh that sounded more like a sob. You wore that blue sweater yesterday. The one with the frayed cuff. You think he didn't notice? He notices everything. My blood ran cold. I had worn that sweater yesterday. Inside this house, alone, how did she know? Before I could ask, the line went dead. Milo growled low, his hackles rising, and then, through the frosted upstairs window, I saw her, a figure on the porch, fists hammering the door in uneven bursts. Her shadow stretched long across the ice, circling like a predator testing the perimeter. I backed away, dragged a chair against the bedroom door, heart pounding with the memory of fists on doors from my childhood, angry men demanding entry, my mother screaming back, the sound of wood straining under rage. This was different, but the fear was the same, I whispered. Don't let her in, though my voice cracked like a plea. The pounding stopped, but silence was worse. When the police finally came, my frantic 911 call barely coherent, they found nothing. The porch empty, the yard pristine except for boot prints circling the house again and again like someone had walked all night without leaving. They promised to patrol, but I heard the doubt in their voices. A lonely woman stranded in a storm, rattled by isolation, but I knew what I'd heard and what I'd seen. I kept telling myself I'd leave as soon as the storm cleared. The house, the photograph, the text, the woman's voice, they were nothing I had to stay for. But the storm didn't let up. By the third day, the ice was so thick that entire trees bent and snapped like bones. The roads were glassy death traps, cars left in ditches with hazard lights blinking until their batteries died. I barely moved from the couch, layered in blankets, Milo pressed against my leg. I tried reading, scrolling old photos on my phone, anything to distract myself. But the house refused distraction. Every glance found that photograph on the dining room wall, the black and white portrait of the house decades earlier. the blurred figure in the upstairs window staring outward. And then, one afternoon, I noticed something I swear hadn't been there before. The photograph had shifted, just slightly. The frame tilted on the nail, the bottom corner crooked. I hadn't touched it. Milo growled at it, low and steady, as if it emitted a frequency only he could hear. I forced myself to straighten it, but when I lifted the frame, my hand recoiled. The back of the photo wasn't paper. It was scratched. Dozens of lines carved deep into the cardboard backing, overlapping until they formed something like letters. Not all of them legible, but enough. "Help me." I shoved it back against the wall and stepped away, pulse hammering. The phone buzzed. This time I didn't answer, but the voicemail that followed made my knees buckle. "Do you really think you're safe in her house? You think she doesn't know? Ask her where the other one went. Ask her what she buried under the porch. You're just another in a long line." Her voice cracked on another, breaking into a sob. I deleted it immediately, but my thumb shook. That night, I dreamt of the photograph. Only it wasn't still, it moved. The figure in the window leaned forward, pressing its palms to the glass. Its face smeared with something dark, like melted shadows. When I jolted awake, Milo was standing stiff at the foot of the bed, staring at the door, growling into the dark. I didn't sleep again. By the fourth day, the storm broke. The sky cleared, ice glittering across the streets like scattered glass. Plows scraped by, throwing up walls of slush. I stuffed my bag, ready to leave this house behind me forever. But Dr. Kelly returned before I could go. She breezed in with her hair tucked neatly under a knit cap, her smile too tight. "Well, you survived," she said, peeling off her gloves. "We were worried you'd go stir-crazy." I tried to laugh, but it sounded brittle. "Something happened here while you were gone." Her expression didn't change, but her eyes flicked just slightly to the dining room wall. The photograph. Then back to me. "What do you mean?" I told her everything. The texts, the calls, the pounding on the door, the police finding boot prints circling the house. My voice cracked when I described the voicemail, how the woman seemed to know me. Kelly listened without interrupting, arms crossed. When I finished, she gave a thin smile. "A misunderstanding," she said. "A jealous acquaintance of my husband's, most likely. He has friends who don't always respect boundaries. Nothing you need to worry about." Her tone was final, dismissive. But something in the way she said acquaintance made my stomach clench. I wanted to push, to ask her about the photograph, about the scratches on the back, about the voice's mention of something buried under the porch. But her eyes told me not to. Her eyes told me she already knew. Instead, she handed me an envelope heavy with cash. "For your trouble. And, Hannah..." She paused, her smile tightening into something sharper. "Sometimes it's better not to involve yourself in other people's entanglements. Entanglements." The word hung in the air like smoke. I left without looking back. Weeks passed. I changed my number. I tried to rebuild routine. Work at the dental office, grocery runs. Evenings spent forcing myself to cook instead of ordering takeout. Ordinary things. But the ordinary never returned. The first time, it was a knock at the door at 2 a.m. I froze in bed, heart jackhammering, but when I looked through the peephole, no one was there. Only wet footprints leading away into the dark. The second time, my phone buzzed with a new number. I shouldn't have answered, but I did. "Blue again today," the voice whispered. "You keep wearing blue. You wore it that weekend too. Did you wear it for him? Or for me?" I hung up, bile rising in my throat. Every day since, I jump at knocks. Every night I lie awake, straining for the sound of fists on the door, for boot prints circling endlessly in the snow. The storm ended, but the storm didn't end. It waits. Last night, I thought I heard someone outside again, the steady crunch of boots pacing. I pressed my forehead to the door, listening, but there was only silence. I told myself I imagined it. I always tell myself I imagine it, but when I woke this morning, there was something on my coat. I keep it hanging by the door, untouched since that weekend. The sleeve was streaked with dried mud, only there hadn't been mud that night. Only ice, only snow. My hands tremble as I write this, but I can't bring myself to wash it off, because if I do, I'll lose the only proof I have that it wasn't all in my head. Or maybe it is in my head. Maybe that's the worst part, because whether it's real or not, I'm still waiting for the next knock, and I don't know what will happen if I ever open the door. I never believed the mirror hated me until it started smiling back. That sounds dramatic, I know, but it's the only way I can explain it. The first time I caught it, I was 11 years old, standing in the cramped bathroom of our faded duplex in Winslow, Arizona. The bulb above the mirror buzzed like a trapped fly, and the desert wind scraped grit across the window screen. I raised my toothbrush, mint foam clinging to my lips, and I swear to God, my reflection's mouth tilted upward a fraction of a second before mine did. Not after before, just a sliver of a delay. Small enough to blame on imagination. Except I didn't imagine the cold that slid into my bones, the way my knees locked, or the metallic tang of blood when I bit my tongue to keep from screaming. I told myself I'd dreamed it, but that was the moment I learned something vital. Mirrors remember things you wish they'd forget. Growing up, I was never the girl who blended in. I wasn't invisible. Not in the way some kids manage to slip through hallways like smoke. I was the opposite. Noticeable, but for the wrong reasons. Horseface, lopsided, Lips McGee. By 12, those names were etched into me as deeply as my own. My lips were full, tilted slightly to one side like a permanent half-frown that no amount of smiling could disguise. My classmates never let me forget it. My mother, a nurse who worked endless shifts to keep us afloat, tried to soften the blows. She'd come home with the smell of antiseptic on her skin, drop her bag by the couch and sit on the edge of my bed when she found me curled beneath the blanket after another rough day. She'd stroke my hair, whisper, "Marina, your features are unique. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise, unique." A word that sounded noble in her mouth but felt poisonous in mine. Unique meant weird. Unique meant wrong. When you're 13 and desperate to belong, unique is just another word for ugly. By the time I reached high school, I'd perfected invisibility through silence. I learned to lower my head in photos, to slouch so my mouth wouldn't seem so present, to laugh quietly so no one could hear the slight whistle between my front teeth. I avoided mirrors unless absolutely necessary. They felt like enemies waiting to catch me slipping. When I left Winslow at 19 to attend Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff, I thought I'd left all of that behind. The desert heat, the whispers, the mirror smiles. But old ghosts don't respect state lines. They follow, waiting. NAU's campus smelled of pine and chalk dust, the air thinner and cooler than Winslow's desert breath. I moved into a beige dorm room with a stranger who already had a boyfriend and a social calendar so full, I might as well have been invisible. That suited me fine. I had my psychology textbooks, my laptop, and the stubborn belief that if I understood people, really understood them, maybe I could figure out why rejection clung to me like a second skin. But then came Adrian Blake. It was the first week of classes, and I'd tucked myself near the back of the lecture hall, scribbling notes furiously. My goal was to disappear into the sea of new faces. I'd been doing fine until I heard it. "You have really pretty eyes." My pen froze. Slowly, I turned. He was smiling. Tall, lean hair and that careless, shaggy mess boy seemed to perfect without trying. His eyes were green, brighter than they had any right to be, like he'd bottled summer inside them. "Sorry," I muttered, certain I'd misheard. "I mean it," he said, leaning in slightly. "They're the kind of eyes people listen to." I almost laughed. Eyes people listened to, mine, the same ones that had been mocked for looking watery, bulging, frog-like. I turned back to my notebook, cheeks hot. Compliments made me nervous. Compliments made me suspicious, but he didn't stop. The next class, he sat beside me again. Then the next. A coffee appeared on my desk one morning before lecture started. A folded napkin beneath it with his messy scrawl. "Thought you could use this." He called me pretty. Beautiful, radiant, even on mornings when I hadn't brushed my hair. At first it irritated me, like he was knocking on a door I'd nailed shut. But after weeks of persistence, something in me shifted. I began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, he saw something I didn't. I bought softer sweaters, jeans that fit instead of hanging loose. I experimented with makeup, trying to balance out my lips, make them less wrong. I bought hazel contacts, subtle enough to highlight my eyes without screaming for attention. I looked in the mirror one morning and didn't recognize myself. For the first time, that felt like a good thing. When Adrian noticed, his smile stretched wide. "See, I told you you're beautiful." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted it so badly it ached. By March, 6 months after we met, I opened my locker in the psychology building to find a folded piece of paper tucked between my books. Be mine, Marina. Adrian, my heart lurched. I clutched the note, imagining his grin, imagining his friend's whispers. Ugly girlfriend, Lips McGee, laughingstock. That night he cornered me outside the library, breath clouding in the cool night air. So, he said, what's your answer? I stared at the pavement, voice trembling. Adrian, I can't. I don't want to be the girl your friends whisper about. I don't want to be ugly. The word stung even as I said it. He touched my hand. You're not ugly, Marina. You're the only girl I see. I don't care what anyone else thinks. I didn't answer. Instead, I let him hug me, and my chest burned with equal parts longing and fear. By April, I caved. I said yes. Dating Adrian felt like stepping into sunlight after years of shadows. He brought me flowers, slipped notes into my backpack, kissed me in front of others like he was proud. At first, I didn't care when his friends made jokes behind my back. Blake's charity case, ugly duckling, Lips McGee. I told myself they didn't matter. He chose me. But one moment shattered everything. It was the last day of class before summer break. I'd texted Adrian that morning saying I was sick. He showed up at my apartment with orange juice, painkillers, and soup. He kissed my forehead, told me to rest. It was tender enough to make me believe for a moment that maybe I'd been wrong to doubt him. But later, restless, I decided to attend class anyway. I slipped into the building quietly, just as laughter erupted from inside. Through the half-open door, I heard one of his friends call, "Where's your ugly girl today?" And then Adrian's voice, light, joking. "She's sick. At least I don't have to kiss those giant lips today." The room exploded with laughter. My chest clenched so hard I couldn't breathe. I turned and walked away before anyone saw me. That night, he broke up with me. Over dinner at a cheap pizza place, as if my heart was just another assignment he had finished. It was fun, Marina. But you're too much work. Don't take it personally, too much work. Those words carved themselves into my bones. I cried for days, shut myself in my room, replaying every smile, every gentle word until they became torture. I stared into my mirror late at night. Makeup streaked down my cheeks, whispering, "Why wasn't I enough?" Sometimes I swear my reflection whispered back. A week later, news spread through campus. Adrian Blake was dead. Hiking trip near Oak Creek Canyon with friends. He slipped. They found his body at the bottom of a cliff, skull fractured, legs twisted grotesquely. People mourned. Candles burned. Flowers piled. Me? I smiled. And that smile, tilted and trembling, lingered in the mirror long after I walked away. I told myself I hadn't killed him. I repeated it like a prayer, the way other people recite the Lord's Prayer before bed. I didn't touch him. I didn't push him. But it didn't matter how many times I whispered it into the darkness of my dorm room. The truth pulsed beneath each word. Somehow he died for me. I felt it in my chest. The same way you feel the first crack of thunder before a storm. That heavy certainty that the world had shifted, and you can never unshift it. When I closed my eyes, I saw him at the bottom of the canyon. Not the way his friends described it, body broken, skull shattered, but the way I imagined it. Eyes open, staring upward, lips pulled back into a final grimace, like he finally understood what I'd known all along. No one leaves me, not without paying. It wasn't the first time. When I was 9, my Chihuahua Pico had been my whole world. I used to fall asleep with him curled against my stomach, his little ribs fluttering like hummingbird wings. The night before my cousin was supposed to leave town, I held Pico tight and begged him not to love anyone more than me. I remember crying into his fur, whispering, "Don't leave me, don't forget me." The next morning he was dead, poisoning, the vet said. My cousin didn't go either. She stayed behind with her grief. When I was 17, my best friend Leah sat cross-legged on my bed and promised we'd talk every day after she moved away. I told her I couldn't stand to lose her, that it would kill me. On the drive to her new home, their car skidded across the freeway and flipped. She died instantly. Both times I had begged. Both times they had promised to stay. Both times the universe had intervened, and now Adrian. I never asked him to fall. I never prayed for it. But the night before his hike, I had stood in front of the mirror, lips trembling, whispering through clenched teeth, "He can't laugh at me again. I won't let him." When the news came, I didn't feel shock. I felt recognition. The universe listens when I hurt. At first I told myself it was justice. Adrian had dangled love like bait, then stripped it away while laughing with his friends. He'd carved the word ugly into me again and again until it bled. His death was balance, but balance quickly turned to something else. I started noticing smaller things. The girl down the hall who always slammed her door. When I walked by, she tripped on the stairs and broke her wrist the same week. I'd muttered under my breath, I wish she'd stop. The professor who smirked when I stumbled over an answer in class collapsed in the parking lot days later, chest clutched tight. The boy in the cafeteria who nudged his friend and whispered about my lips choked on his food until paramedics arrived. Coincidence, people said. Bad luck, random chance, but I knew better. It always began the same way. First, the humiliation, the sting of being noticed for the wrong reasons. Then the coil in my stomach tightening until it ached. And finally the whisper, sometimes out loud, sometimes only in my head. Make it stop. Make them pay. And the universe obeyed. Or maybe not the universe. Maybe something else. Something with teeth and patience crouched just behind the glass. The mirror grew bolder. At night, when the dorm was silent and the halls smelled faintly of bleach and burnt popcorn, I'd stand in front of it and study myself. My lips tilted and trembling, my eyes glassy with tears. I'd try to smile. The reflection smiled wider, slower, lips pulling too far, until it looked like a different face altogether. Once, I whispered, "No one leaves me." The glass fogged like breath, though my mouth was closed. Another time I asked, "Is it you?" My reflection blinked, deliberate and slow, a full second after I had. I started avoiding mirrors, but they followed me anyway. In the bathroom faucets, in car windows, in the blank black screens of computers. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection watching me too closely, lips twitching like it wanted to speak. I began to test it. One night, restless and angry, I whispered into the mirror, "I want them gone." I didn't even specify who. I just thought of all the faces, snickering, mocking, whispering. The next day, news spread that a girl from our floor had been hospitalized after an accident downtown. I hadn't even known her name, but I remembered her eyes skimming over me once, her mouth tugging into a private laugh. That's when I understood. The mirror wasn't waiting for me to be specific. It was listening to the hunger underneath. By the end of the semester, I had stopped eating much, stopped sleeping altogether. My skin prickled constantly. My ears rang with a low hum that no one else seemed to notice. I'd sit in class and watch students' mouths move, not hearing words, only seeing their lips stretch too wide, too mocking. One night, I woke to find my laptop glowing on my desk. I hadn't touched it. On the screen was my reflection in the darkened webcam. Lips moving through mine were still. I slammed the lid shut and shoved it under my bed. The next morning, it was back on my desk, screen cracked. I stopped questioning. People left me alone more and more. Maybe they could sense it. Maybe they smelled something on me. Fear wrought inevitability. I saw it in their eyes, the way they looked quickly away when I passed. I used to dream of being invisible. Now I was something else entirely. The final test came in June. My mother had been calling, worried about my silence. She begged me to come home for the summer, to let her take care of me. I wanted to. God, I wanted to sit at our chipped kitchen table and let her stroke my hair and tell me I was unique. But then she said the word that broke me. "You'll be fine. You're stronger than this." Fine. Stronger. As if everything I'd felt, everything I'd lost, was weakness. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror in my apartment. The hum was louder than ever, rattling my teeth. My reflection tilted its head at me, smiling that too wide smile. I whispered, "Don't let her leave me." The phone call came 2 days later. My mother had collapsed during her shift at the hospital. A sudden aneurysm. They said it was instant. No pain. I dropped the phone. I didn't cry. I only looked at myself in the mirror and whispered, "Thank you." But the reflection didn't smile that time. It only stared, lips pressed together, eyes hollow and patient. And for the first time, I wondered if I was the one doing the asking, or if I was only ever the one being asked. Now I don't beg. I don't whisper. I don't need to. When I walk past mirrors, I feel the weight of the glass bending toward me, waiting. People cross the street when they see me, as if they know accidents hover like gnats around my head. I used to want love. I used to want to be seen. Now I only want one thing, to never be left again. And if the universe or the thing in the mirror ever hesitates, if it forgets its duty, I'll press my palm against the cold surface and remind it. Because I know the truth now. The truth I think I've always known: I am not invisible. I am the reflection, and the reflection always wins.